Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're doing a deep dive on something that you might not think about every day.
Right.
Mariner credentials.
Oh, yeah. Those are important.
Yeah, so, folks who are out there navigating these massive ships across the oceans, and keeping that global trade flowing.
Yeah, it's really critical work, and the scale of it is just mind-boggling.
Oh, absolutely.
Over 200,000 mariners,
Wow.
thousands of ships,
Yeah.
hundreds of companies, all relying on a system that makes sure that everything runs smoothly.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting because that system they're relying on is called MMLD.
Right.
And it's about as up to date as a flip phone these days.
Oh, wow.
We're talking mountains of paperwork,
Yeah.
manual processes,
Right.
delays that can have real-world consequences.
Think about it like this. If a mariner's credential is delayed, then that means a ship can't leave port on time.
Oh, no.
And then that delay ripples through the supply chain, and it affects businesses and ultimately affects you, the consumer, waiting for that new gadget or those imported goods.
So basically the Coast Guard, they're like, okay, we gotta step up our game here.
Right.
With this new system called NAVITA,
Yeah.
which is designed to bring mariner credentialing into the 21st century, the digital age.
Yeah. It's a cloud-based platform.
Yeah.
And it aims to streamline everything.
Wow.
From the application to the delivery, making the whole process just much faster and more efficient, more secure.
I like it.
Yeah.
So that's where this deep dive comes in today.
Yeah.
We're going to really unpack this ambitious project and explore how it's going to change the game for mariners and the entire maritime industry as a whole.
We'll also look at the Coast Guard's strategy for tackling this massive undertaking.
Yeah.
From the initial request for proposals all the way to the development process and how they're going to eventually roll out NAVITA.
I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah.
So let's start with the current system, MMLD.
Okay.
It's been the workhorse for mariner credentialing for years.
Right.
But it's really showing its age. Can you kind of give us a sense of what some of the biggest pain points are with this system?
Well, imagine you're a mariner and you're applying for your credentials.
Okay.
You have to fill out stacks of forms.
Oh, no.
Gather all the supporting documents, and then you have to mail everything to the Coast Guard.
Oh, my God.
Then it can take weeks or sometimes even months for your application to be processed.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is for many mariners.
You bet.
And it's not just the mariners who are affected. Employers have to deal with these delays in getting their crew credentialed.
Right.
Which can impact their operations and their bottom line.
So NAVITA is kind of coming in as the knight in shining armor.
Right.
Promising to slay the paperwork dragon.
Slay a dragon.
And bring in this new era of efficiency.
Exactly. So one of the key goals of NAVITA is to eliminate as much of that paperwork as possible.
Okay.
Mariners will be able to apply online, upload documents digitally, and track the status of their applications in real time.
So that sounds like a huge improvement for everybody involved.
Absolutely. It's going to save time,
Yeah.
reduce errors, and make the whole process much more transparent.
I like it. Okay, so let's unpack NAVITA a little bit further.
Okay.
The Coast Guard has issued a request for quotation, or RFQ, to find a contractor to build this system.
Right.
And we're talking big bucks here. The estimated value of this contract is $49,600,000.
Wow, that's a significant investment.
It is.
Shows how seriously the Coast Guard is taking this modernization effort.
What are some of the key things that they're looking for in a contractor?
Yeah.
What are the must-haves for NAVITA to be successful?
Well, first and foremost, the system has to be user-friendly for both the Coast Guard staff, who will be using it every day, and the mariners themselves.
Right, because if it's just as clunky and confusing as the old system, no one's going to want to use it.
Exactly. They've emphasized the need for intuitive interfaces that are easy to navigate, regardless of your technical skills.
So no more wrestling with those complicated forms or trying to decipher cryptic instructions.
That's the goal.
I like it.
They also want a system that's built on modern technology and follows best practices for software development, like Agile methodology and DevSecOps.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't tech wizards, can you kind of break down what those terms mean and why they're so important?
Sure. Agile development is all about flexibility and iterative progress.
Okay.
So instead of trying to build the entire system at once, they break it down into smaller chunks and release them gradually.
So it's like building a house.
Right.
You start with the foundation, and then you add rooms and features as you go.
That's a great analogy.
Yes, right.
And this approach allows them to adapt to changing needs and get feedback from users along the way.
So they're not just blindly following a plan. They're constantly adjusting course as needed.
Precisely.
I like it.
Now, DevSecOps is all about integrating security into every stage of the development process.
Oh, that makes sense. You don't want to wait till the end to realize there's a huge security flaw.
Exactly. And this is especially important when you're dealing with sensitive information like Mariner credentials.
Okay, so we've got user-friendliness, agile development, DevSecOps.
Uh-huh.
What other must-haves are on the Coast Guard's list?
Well, security is paramount. They're requiring the contractor to meet the strict security standards set by the Defense Information Systems Agency, or DISA.
So we're talking about making sure this system is Fort Knox level secure.
You got it. They're also mandating that the system be accessible to everyone, regardless of their abilities.
Okay.
This means complying with Section 508, which sets guidelines for making electronic and information technology accessible to people with disabilities.
That's great to hear. It's important to ensure that everyone has equal access to these critical services, but let's be honest,
Yeah.
government IT projects don't always have the best track record.
Right.
So what gives us confidence that NAVITA will actually succeed?
Well, for one, the Coast Guard seems to be approaching this very strategically. They're using Agile development, which, as we mentioned, emphasizes flexibility and iterative progress.
Right.
This means they can adapt to changing requirements and incorporate feedback along the way, reducing the risk of ending up with a system that doesn't meet their needs.
So it's less about sticking rigidly to a plan and more about being able to adjust course as needed.
Exactly. And they've also built in a lot of checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
They've outlined a comprehensive testing and evaluation process, including the use of an independent test agent, or ITA.
Okay.
This independent body will play a crucial role in ensuring that NAVITA meets all the required standards and performs as expected in a real-world setting.
And they're bringing in the ITA early on, right, to avoid any surprises down the road?
Yes. The idea is to have them involved throughout the development process, not just at the end. This will help catch any issues early on and ensure that the final product is truly fit for purpose.
That's a smart move. It sounds like the Coast Guard is really trying to learn from past mistakes and do this right.
Indeed. And another important aspect is their focus on the transition from the old system to the new one. They want to make sure that this happens as smoothly as possible and that there are no disruptions to the credentialing process for mariners.
That makes sense. You don't want to pull the rug out from under everyone who's currently using MMLD.
Exactly. The plan is to phase out the old system, gradually allowing mariners and Coast Guard staff to adapt to NAVITA at their own pace.
Okay, so we've got this modern, user-friendly, secure, and accessible system in the works.
Yeah,
But let's not forget, this is a massive undertaking.
it is.
What are some of the challenges that you foresee in bringing NAVITA to life?
Well, one challenge is simply the complexity of the system. We're talking about managing a huge amount of data, integrating with other systems, and making sure that everything works seamlessly.
It's like trying to orchestrate a symphony with hundreds of instruments all playing different parts.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Another challenge is managing expectations. This is a major change for the Coast Guard in the maritime industry.
Right.
And it's important to ensure that everyone understands the benefits and is on board with the transition.
Communication is key.
Absolutely. And of course, there's always the risk of unforeseen technical issues cropping up during development.
Yeah.
Software development is rarely straightforward,
Right.
and there's always the possibility of bugs or glitches that need to be fixed.
So even with the best planning, there will be bumps in the road.
That's just the nature of software development. But the key is to have a plan for dealing with these challenges as they arise and to be able to adapt and make changes as needed.
And thankfully, they're using that agile approach, which should allow them to be more nimble in responding to those unexpected challenges, right?
Exactly. So while there are certainly hurdles ahead, the Coast Guard seems to be approaching this project with a clear vision, a solid plan, and a commitment to doing it right.
Now, they're not trying to build the whole enchilada at once. They're focusing on delivering a minimum viable product, or MVP, first.
Right.
What exactly is that, and why are they taking this approach?
The MVP is essentially the core set of features needed to get NAVITA up and running.
Okay.
Think of it like the foundation of the house we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not the finished product, but it provides the essential structure and functionality to build upon.
So it's like getting the basic plumbing and electrical working before you start adding fancy fixtures and appliances.
Precisely. And this approach makes sense for a couple of reasons. First, it allows the Coast Guard to get the system into the hands of users, sooner get feedback, and start realizing some of the benefits more quickly.
So they can start learning what works and what doesn't and make adjustments as they go.
Exactly. Second, it helps manage risk by focusing on the core features. First, they can mitigate the risk of getting bogged down and trying to build everything at once.
So it's a more manageable approach to a complex project.
Exactly. Now, the initial MVP is going to focus on what they call the merchant mariner vetting and credentialing requirements, or MVCR. This covers the essential functions needed to issue credentials, verify qualifications, and maintain mariner records.
So it's the heart of the system, the core functions that everything else will be built upon.
You could say that. All right, so they're starting with the essentials and then gradually adding more features and capabilities over time.
Exactly. And they've been very transparent about this approach in the RFQ, outlining their plans for subsequent releases and how they will prioritize new features based on user feedback and evolving needs.
So it's a dynamic process, constantly evolving and improving?
That's the idea. And this iterative approach is another sign that they're serious about building a system that truly meets the needs of the maritime industry.
Now, building the software is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
What other challenges does this project face?
You're right. There's a whole ecosystem around NAVITA that needs to be considered. For instance, they'll need to re-engineer and automate existing system interfaces, develop new ones to connect with other relevant systems, and of course, provide comprehensive training to Coast Guard staff on how to use the new system.
It's not just about building a website, it's about creating a whole new way of doing things.
Exactly. And let's not forget, the critical aspect of system security meeting those stringent DISA requirements is no small feat.
I can only imagine they're also going to need to provide ongoing support to users, both within the Coast Guard and to mariners themselves.
Absolutely. They've outlined plans for a multi-tiered help desk system that will provide assistance to both internal and external users.
It sounds like they've got a lot on their plate, but they seem to have a solid plan in place.
Indeed, they have. And what's also impressive is their attention to detail. The RFQ covers everything from user experience and accessibility to cybersecurity and data rights. It's clear that they thought this through very carefully.
Speaking of data rights, the RFQ is very clear that all data generated by the contractor belongs to the government. Why is this important?
This is a common clause in government contracts, and it's meant to protect the government's interests.
Okay.
It ensures that the government has full ownership and control over the data, which is especially important when dealing with sensitive information, such as mariner credentials.
So it's not just about building the system, but also about who owns the data it generates. That's a crucial distinction. Okay, so we've talked about the software itself, the development process, and the many challenges involved.
Right.
But let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are the potential benefits of NAVITA for mariners and the maritime industry as a whole?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive into more deeply in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, everyone. This deep dive is just getting started.
So, picking up where we left off, let's really explore, what NAVITA could mean for the maritime world. What really stands out to me is the potential for, just increased efficiency across the board.
Okay. Paint a picture for me. How would that efficiency play out in real life for someone actually working in the industry?
So imagine you're a mariner, right? And think about how much simpler your life would be if you could renew your credentials with just a few clicks online, instead of wrestling with, mountains of paperwork.
Yeah.
No more waiting weeks or even months for processing. NAVITA could free up a lot of time and energy, allowing mariners to really focus on what matters, which is their job.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge win for mariners. Less hassle, less stress, and just a smoother experience overall.
Exactly. And it's not just about convenience for mariners.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard itself will benefit from that increased efficiency, allowing them to process applications faster and allocate resources more effectively.
And if the Coast Guard is running smoother, that benefits the entire industry, right?
Absolutely. More efficient processing means less downtime for ships, which can translate to faster cargo deliveries and a more robust supply chain.
Wow.
This could have a ripple effect across the entire global trade network.
That's huge. Okay, so we've got efficiency. What other benefits are on the horizon with this new system?
Well, security is a major one.
Yeah.
NAVITA is being built with the latest cybersecurity standards in mind, which means better protection against things like fraud and identity theft.
Right.
This is particularly important in the maritime industry, where credentials are so valuable and susceptible to forgery.
Yeah, it makes sense. You don't want someone with fake credentials operating a giant cargo ship.
Exactly. A more secure system protects mariners, employers, and the general public. Plus, it strengthens national security by safeguarding our ports and waterways.
So NAVITA is kind of like a digital guardian watching over the maritime world and keeping things safe and sound.
That's a good way to think about it. It's like having a watchful eye constantly monitoring the system for any suspicious activity.
I like it. Now, one thing that really struck me while reading about NAVITA is the emphasis on accessibility. It's not just about making the system modern and efficient, but also making sure that it's usable by everyone.
Absolutely. And this is where Section 508 compliance comes in.
Mm,
That the Coast Guard is requiring the contractor to ensure that Novito is accessible to people with disabilities,
right.
which means everything from the software itself to the supporting documentation and training materials needs to be designed with accessibility in mind.
Yeah, this is a really important point. We often talk about the digital divide, but sometimes we forget that it's not just about access to technology.
Right.
It's also about access to the information and services that that technology provides.
You hit the nail on the head, and this is something that the Coast Guard seems to be taking very seriously.
Mm.
They're not just paying lip service to accessibility, they're baking it into the very core of the system.
Okay, so we've covered efficiency, security, accessibility.
Yeah.
What about transparency?
Okay.
How will NAVITA make the credentialing process more transparent for everyone involved?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One of the key features of NAVITA is real-time tracking.
Okay.
Mariners will be able to log in and see exactly where their application is in the process.
Oh, wow.
No more wondering if their documents have been received or if a decision has been made.
Mm.
It's all right there at their fingertips.
So no more playing phone tag with the Coast Guard trying to get an update on your application?
Exactly. And this transparency extends to employers as well.
Oh.
They'll be able to easily verify the credentials of their crew and track the status of renewals.
Oh, wow.
This can help streamline their operations and ensure compliance with regulations.
So it's like bringing the credentialing process out of the shadows and into the light where everyone can see what's happening.
You got it. And this increased transparency can lead to greater accountability and trust within the system.
Now, we've talked a lot about the potential benefits of NAVITA,
Right.
but let's be realistic. Transitioning to a new system is never easy. What kind of bumps in the road do you anticipate during the rollout?
More change is always a challenge, especially when you're dealing with a complex system like this.
Right.
There's bound to be a learning curve for both Coast Guard staff and mariners as they adapt to the new way of doing things.
It's like switching from a familiar old car to a brand new model with all the latest gadgets and gizmos.
Right.
It takes time to get used to the new bells and whistles.
Exactly. Training will be crucial in ensuring a smooth transition. The Coast Guard will need to provide comprehensive training programs for their staff, and they'll also need to offer support and guidance to mariners as they navigate the new system.
So it sounds like communication will be key in making sure that everyone feels comfortable and confident using NAVITA.
Absolutely. Clear communication, regular updates, and responsive support will be essential in managing the transition and minimizing any disruption.
Now, one concern that often comes up with new technology is data privacy. So how will NAVITA ensure that mariners' personal information is protected?
That's a very valid concern, and the Coast Guard has addressed it head-on in the RFQ.
Okay, good.
They've outlined strict requirements for data security and privacy, ensuring that the system meets the highest standards for protecting sensitive information.
So mariners can rest assured that their data is in good hands.
Absolutely. The system will be built with multiple layers of security, including encryption and access controls to safeguard mariner data from unauthorized access or breaches.
Okay, so we've got security covered. What about the long-term vision for NAVITA? Is this just a one-off project, or are there plans to expand and evolve the system in the future?
That's a question I was hoping you'd ask.
Huh.
The Coast Guard has been very clear that this is not a static project.
Okay.
They see NAVITA as a platform for continuous improvement and innovation.
I like that.
They've already outlined plans for future releases that will add new features and capabilities based on user feedback and evolving needs.
So it's not just about fixing what's broken with the old system. It's about creating a system that can adapt and grow to meet future challenges.
Exactly. They're thinking long-term and strategically about how to leverage technology to enhance mariner credentialing and maritime safety.
Now, one detail I found particularly interesting in the RFQ is the requirement for the contractor to submit monthly travel invoices that include trip reports.
That is an interesting detail. It suggests that the Coast Guard wants a high level of accountability and transparency in how the project is managed.
Right.
They want to know where the money's going and what progress is being made.
It's like they're saying, we're investing a lot in this project, and we want to make sure every dollar is being used wisely.
Exactly, and it shows they're serious about making sure data is a success.
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the aging system that's about to be replaced.
Right.
MMLD. What's the plan for transitioning away from the old system and onto NAVITA?
The Coast Guard is aiming for a phased approach. They're not going to just flip a switch and shut down MMLD overnight.
Right.
That would create chaos and disruption.
It would be like trying to change a tire while the car is still moving.
Exactly. Instead, they'll gradually roll out NAVITA in stages, starting with the core MVCR functionalities and then adding more features and capabilities over time.
Okay.
As NAVITA becomes more robust, they'll start phasing out MLD, eventually decommissioning it completely.
So it's a carefully orchestrated dance with one system gracefully stepping in as the other one bows out.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this gradual approach will allow the Coast Guard to work out any kinks in the new system, ensure users are comfortable with it, and avoid any major disruptions to the credentialing process.
Okay, so we've talked about the transition plan, the benefits, the challenges, and the overall vision for NAVITA, but what about the mariners themselves?
Right.
What are the key takeaways for them as they prepare for this new system?
Well, I think the most important message for mariners is don't panic. This is a positive change that will ultimately make your lives easier.
Okay.
NAVITA is designed to be user-friendly, efficient, and secure.
So embrace the change and get ready for a smoother, more streamlined experience.
Exactly. The Coast Guard will provide plenty of information and support to help you navigate the transition. They're committed to making this a success for everyone involved.
Now, this might seem like a very specific deep dive into a niche topic,
Right.
but I think there are some broader lessons here about the role of technology in modernizing government services.
I couldn't agree more. NAVITA is a great example of how technology can be used to streamline processes, improve efficiency, and enhance security. It's a blueprint for how other government agencies can leverage technology to better serve their constituents.
It's a reminder that government doesn't have to be synonymous with bureaucracy, and red tape technology can help make government services more user-friendly, accessible, and responsive to the needs of the people it serves.
And it's not just about the technology itself, it's also about the approach.
Yeah.
The Coast Guard's commitment to agile development, user-centered design, and transparency is setting a new standard for government IT projects.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be following these developments. Who knows, maybe NAVITA will inspire other industries to rethink their approach to credentialing and licensing.
Right.
Imagine a world where you can manage all your professional certifications and licenses digitally in one secure and accessible platform.
It's a fascinating thought. It's certainly within the realm of possibility. Technology has the power to transform the way we do business,
Yeah.
interact with government, and live our lives. And NAVITA is a prime example of that transformative power in action.
And on that note, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into NAVITA with some final thoughts and predictions for the future. Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back. And, as we've been talking about this NAVITA system, I keep thinking about, like the potential impact beyond just, mariner credentialing.
Yeah. It is interesting to think about
Yeah.
how this kind of digital transformation could be a model for other industries. Like think about healthcare, where professionals need licenses and certifications.
Oh, no.
Or aviation with all its pilot qualifications and aircraft registrations.
So it seems like those basic principles of NAVITA, the streamlining, the security, the transparency, could be applied in so many other areas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where you could manage all your professional credentials digitally.
Wow.
In one secure and easy-to-use platform. It could revolutionize how we approach credentialing across a wide range of fields.
Now, before we get too carried away with all the possibilities,
Right.
let's bring it back to NAVITA for a moment. There's one more detail from the RFQ I wanted to touch on, and that's the requirement for the contractor to comply with something called Mission Partner Identity Credential and Access Management, or MPICAM.
Ah, yes, MPICAM. Essentially, it's the Coast Guard system for controlling access to their facilities and IT systems.
So it's like a super secure digital bouncer, making sure only authorized personnel can get in.
That's a great analogy. It's especially important for contractors who need to access sensitive data and systems to do their work on NAVITA.
So the contractor's employees will need to go through like a really rigorous vetting process, like kind of like getting a top secret security clearance.
Precisely. They'll need to obtain a Department of Defense Common Access Card, or CAC. There's like a digital key that grants access to specific systems and information.
Makes sense. You don't want just anyone, wandering around a digital Fort Knox.
Exactly. Security is paramount when you're dealing with something as critical as mariner credentials. And the Coast Guard has laid out very clear guidelines on how contractors need to comply with MPICAM.
It seems like they've thought of everything from, user experience to data security to contractor access. They're really, dotting their I's and crossing their T's on this project.
And that attention to detail is encouraging. Suggests that they're really committed to getting this right and creating a system that will serve the maritime industry well into the future.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling optimistic about NAVITA. It's ambitious, it's complex, but it has the potential to be a real game changer, not just for mariner credentialing, but potentially as a model for other sectors as well.
It's definitely a project worth watching. The Coast Guard is taking on a significant challenge, but they seem to be approaching it in a thoughtful and strategic way.
And as they say, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor.
That's a great way to put it. The challenges involved in developing and implementing NAVITA are just part of the journey toward a more efficient, secure, and modern maritime industry.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of mariner credentialing.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been fascinating to explore this innovative project and consider its wider implications. And for all you listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of the changes coming to the maritime industry. Keep exploring, keep learning, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the topics that shape our world.